welcome to Tune In. My name's Sammy.
I'm Nora.
And my name is Lasma.
On today's show, we have a man of many talents. He's a musician and an improv actor with the Comedy Store Players. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Richard Vranch.
Thank you, Richard, so much for being here. And as Sammy just mentioned, you can play musical instruments. You perform to a large crowd with the Comedy Store Players. You do voiceovers and you do some writing, animations and bits of acting. And you even used to be a physicist.
That was a long time ago, but that's true, yes.
Is there anything you cannot do?
Oh, everything. I can do those things a little bit, and that's all. But some people like to do one thing and stick with it, and that's great, because once you're known for it, people keep offering you to do that. But I kind of like doing different things, and so far I've got away with it, so I'm happy.
So, being a physicist and a performer are quite different. How did you go about making that jump from one to the other?
Well, I was very lucky. I'm quite old, so I went to university in the 70s, and that's a long time ago. And so I was doing science, but to be honest, I found the scientists a little bit dull. And so the people I really hung out with were the people at the university comedy club called the Footlights. And so I started a double act and I started doing sketches in my spare time. And although I kept the two going side by side, I did research, so I did a PhD for 4 years, which gave me even more chance to do student theatre and comedy and get better at it. In the end, I had to make a decision which one I was going to do. And because of all my friends who were doing the comedy were going off and doing it professionally and starting to be on the radio and the TV, I thought if I didn't give it a go, I'd never forgive myself. So I resigned from my academic science job in 1985, and then since then I've been doing comedy full time.
So how did you, like in 1985, that's when you joined the Comedy Store Players?
In fact, 86, yeah. The Comedy Store
sorry.
Players is my improvisation group, and
Yes.
we've been going for 30 years, and I joined just after it started. But yeah, that's been a constant throughout my...
So how did you join them?
Well, again, through university. One of the chaps, Neil Malarkey, who founded the Comedy Store Players, along with Paul Merton and Mike Myers, the Wayne's World guy, and Kit Hollaback. I was at college with him, so he wanted someone to come along and help out, so I said yes, and I'm still there.
Wow. So you didn't have like auditions or something like that?
No, we never auditioned. It was most things in my life have been done with no written contract, just someone in a pub saying, do you fancy doing this? Yes. Do you want another drink? All right.
Seems
really,
like a good way of doing things.
And I tell you what, whatever you do, if you're working with people that you know and you like, it's the best way, because it's not like you're going to work. If you audition for things, sometimes you get on with them, sometimes you don't. You've always got that risk. But I've been so lucky that the people I work with, again, people like Paul Merton and Josie Lawrence, who you may know from the TV, it's not like we were in TV land and got together. We were all friends, doing jobs for no money in small rooms above pubs with two people in the audience. And we all bonded and got together and liked each other during that time. And we're very lucky that we've managed to stay working together. We go off and do other things, of course. Josie goes off and does her acting, and Paul does his TV stuff, and I go off and do my things, as you said. And again, that also brings freshness back to it, because if you've got a strong group that works together, if you stay together all the time, it can get a bit stifling. So it's nice if you can go off and then come back and bring those things back. And we're just very lucky, really, and we know it. Every day we count our blessings.
That is so amazing to work together with friends and just have a good time.
Yeah, you seem to be doing that.
We're doing quite
So is it like an instant connection then with you and the Comedy Store Players? Well, obviously, yes, because you were friends.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's easy enough to connect and work together like that.
In those days, there was no comedy industry, or if there was, it was an old-fashioned comedy industry, you know, kind of the old, slightly sexist and racist comedy that came out through the 60s and 70s. And the alternative comedy in London in the 80s was a reaction against that. So I was doing a double act, a very strange, naughty, rude double act, and Paul was doing stand-up, and Neil was doing a double act with Mike Myers, and they were appearing on television with Timmy Mallet, who was a well-respected TV presenter of the time. And so we were all doing these things, and you'd find yourself on the same bill, or you'd find yourself on the same train, or at the Edinburgh Festival, or something like that. And it's when you sit in the pub afterwards and find that you make each other laugh, that you realise you've got something in common. And the improvisation was a complete risk, because there was no tradition of improvisation in this country. There were a few people doing it. Jim Sweeney and Steve Steen had been doing it, and there were some strange improv things on the telly in the 60s, which people don't remember. But people took a risk putting us on. The Comedy Store and Don Ward at the Comedy Store took a big risk, saying, "You mean you're going to go on with no script?" Yep. Okay, let's give it a go. And so far, he's still letting us do it 30 years later. So we're very lucky. But it was a different comedy world. I think nowadays people get into comedy because they want to be a millionaire like Lee Evans, or they want to be eccentric like Bill Bailey, or they want to be like Jack Dee. Now, we didn't have those role models. We were blazing the trail through the jungle of trying to do a new comedy that wasn't offensive. And so in a sense, it's strange that people I think of as new up-and-coming comedians, because they're a bit younger than us, are in fact 50 now, because I still think of them as new young upstarts. But of course, underneath our generation, a whole lot of people have come through, and comedy is now a big business, which is probably a good thing. I don't know. I think some people do it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate.
Mm.
Now, with the Comedy Store players, you play a lot of games and you take a lot of suggestions from the audience.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important to have a vast amount of knowledge about different styles and subjects?
No. As I said at the beginning of the interview, I know a little bit about a lot of things. And that's good. And good training for that is sitting at home all day and watching daytime television, which I recommend to anybody. And so, for example, if you get a suggestion from the audience and it's about Henry VIII, now if I was an expert on Henry VIII, I could improvise something so detailed it would just be boring. And unless you knew those facts, it wouldn't be interesting. And if you knew those facts, it still wouldn't be interesting. So in fact, as long as you know about as much as they do, and as long as you can make jokes which are accessible because they know what you're talking about, once you go and try and be clever, you lose them. You mustn't try and be clever.
But what do you do if you don't know the suggestion that someone makes?
That's even better, because you pretend you know, and they know better, and they laugh at you, which is what you want.
That's what you want to do, yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch telly for homework.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the cultural references are often the things we joke about.
Yeah.
Internet things, or things in the news, or whatever they shout. It's truly interactive, and so knowing those references is important. Yeah.
So you prepare by watching telly, but what do you do if you have a bad day, but you have to go on that stage, you have to look happy?
Well, weirdly, when you're on stage and you're truly improvising, you don't think. You just say. You listen to what the other person says and you say. So in a sense, you're on autopilot. So it takes you into like a trance state. So if you've had a bad day, or you've had bad news, or something bad is happening, it's the best thing you can do, because it takes you totally away from it. And that trance state is so strong that at the end of the show, people come up and say, "Oh, that bit about the penguin was very funny." And which bit about the penguin? You don't remember it, because it's like you think of it and say it, but you haven't pressed save. It's because it's going so quickly, you've forgotten to save it. So if you were writing an essay, that's bad, you'd lose it. But at the end of our show, often you don't remember what you said. So having a bad day is fine. And also, it's not just you. As a solo performer, that would be difficult. But when you've got 4 or 5 other people on stage with you, even if you can't think of something, they'll say something, and then you say something back, and in a few seconds, you're somewhere that none of you could have got to on your own. But together, you've got there. So it's like a trick.
It's like an ensemble mind.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
And as you are mentioning, like all the teamwork, when we went to your show, I just kept wondering, how did you get to that point? You just finish each other's sentences.
Words, even.
Even words. It's so amazing. How do you? Can I say you practice improvisation? How do you do that?
We don't practice, I'm afraid. I mean, it's possible to study improvisation and do workshops, and that's very good for theatre or for devising characters or plays, or even it's good socially to people do improv just because it helps them feel better. But we don't practice. What we have is 30 years of going to pubs and doing festivals. And no, we just know each other. You know what it's like with your family or your friends. You can finish each other's sentences, and we're like a family. But
So this is really important. What if, I don't know, somebody makes a completely new troupe? How can they do that then?
The thing to do is to start off with people you like, people you actually want to go and be in a room with for 2 hours. And I think it's also useful if you're all about the same level of expertise, same experience. When we started, Mike Myers, who knew all about improvisation from Canada and America, where he'd been before, because it was a bigger tradition there before, he was so good. We just used to watch him do everything and think, well, we can't do that. We can't, you know. And if there was a problem in the scene or someone had said something unhelpful,
Yeah.
he'd be in and rescue the scene, make a joke, and give you something else to do. Now, Mike was offered a job back in the States, and he and the fact that he left and went on to do what he did meant that we had room to grow. And if he'd stayed, I think none of us would have progressed. So
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's
It's
a great
so interesting.
advice.
I think we will have to invite you to another show because there's so much to tell about it. But today, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Richard Vranch in the studio. Don't forget to tune in again next week when we will have the Frozen cast, and they will help us to solve the mystery as to why the TV studio is always so freezing cold.
Wouldn't that just make it colder though?
Let it go, no, just let it go. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Bye.
See you.